All right, I have to tell a quick story. A lot of people would stay over because Stratton had rooms and everything.
Mhm.
And yeah, there were a whole bunch of people in the bar, and Skip had been finishing up some stuff. And he comes walking in the door, and like 30 people just stood up and clapped. They were like so happy at the challenge he had presented to them for that. It was
Wow.
the gravel grinders, and I've never seen like a race director just cheered like that. It was pretty amazing. I was like, that is very gratifying because he put a ton of work into designing the course and clearing it. And, he did almost all that work himself. And so I was very happy that he got that kind of adulation. It's usually, the entire ride, they were cursing him probably. But once it was done, they were like, you're a hero.
Yeah. Okay, welcome back to the New England Endurance Podcast, where we dive deep into the people, stories, and events that fuel our region's incredible endurance scene. And this is episode 60. For those of you that are new to the show, it's our second one for season 3. And today we're celebrating one of the most iconic and demanding events in New England, the B2VT Ride, and its gravel sibling, the VT Monster Gravel Grinder. And both are known for their relentless courses, loyal community, love to do them. Joining us are two legends in the New England endurance space. It's a pleasure to have Skip Thomas. He's one of the B2VT Ride directors, the founder of the VT Monster, and a lifelong cyclist whose adventures include piloting a tandem bicycle across the U.S. with an octogenarian stoker twice, not once, twice, which is crazy. And we have the infamous Karen Smyers, who's been a guest on the podcast since season 1. She's one of the head organizers of the B2VT this year as well. She's also a past world champion triathlete. If you haven't heard of her, she's in the Hall of Fame, Ironman winner. Look her up on the internet. She's also a coach, and she's one of those special people in the New England endurance community that really helps build community. And I think this is going to be a great episode for the roadies out there, for the gravel folks. So welcome both to the podcast. How are you?
Great. Thanks for having us.
Yeah,
Cool.
super fun to be here.
Yeah. So Skip, I want to kick it off with you. So I think some folks have heard of the B2VT if you're in that world, but I'd love for you to tell us just what is the B2VT? I understand it used to be something called the B2B. How did it get started? And, where did the name come from and what's it all about?
Sure. Yeah, it almost seems hard to remember nearly 26 years ago when I came up with the idea with Harpoon Brewery. But at the time, Harpoon had been a sponsor of Team Psycho for a few years, and they acquired the Catamount Brewery in Windsor, Vermont, and we're looking for sort of marketing stunts to do things. And approached the team, and we did a lot of different things with them, and they approached us and said, hey, would you guys be willing over 2 days to ride 150 miles to Windsor, and then we'll have a little party at the end and it'll be a big celebration. And in true Team Psycho fashion, we were like, absolutely not, but we would do it in one day. And they thought, oh, fantastic, that's amazing. And so we, in sort of a half-ass way, concocted this whole idea to meet in Boston. And then they had a van, and there were 26 of us willing to take it on. And we rolled out of there at, I don't know. I would like to say 6 in the morning, but I think this group doesn't really rally at 6. So it was probably a little later back then. And then it was a complete beatdown, just, sufferfest all the way to Windsor. And we had a little party, and they put up tents for us, and we camped in the front of the brewery, and they thought, hey, this is really amazing. We should try this again. And that was really sort of how it started. And then it grew exponentially from there. But the name was brewery to brewery. So it still was Harpoon to Harpoon at that point, but it was two breweries.
So what made it evolve into B2VT?
Well, when Harpoon, I think in 2013 or even 2012, they decided that, what we're really good at is brewing beer. And while we're really good at putting on events, it is just consuming us, and we just can't do it anymore. And so in 2013, they looked to find some way to partner with someone, and realized that even partnering with someone, if you want to have like a third party, sort of ride operator, it still requires a lot of work and focus, especially if you're really detail oriented. So then Karen, myself, and a couple of other psychos sort of raised our hands and said, we'd like to keep going. So we took over, still in partnership with Harpoon from a beer sponsorship, but then we moved to start in Bedford, Vermont. Still going to Vermont. We changed the final destination for a little while, so it just became the Bedford or the battleground to Vermont.
Cool. So, okay, Karen, I got to ask you a question. So, Skip referenced the word psycho a couple of times. I think before we go any further, can we just tell the audience, like, what is a psycho and how are they involved with this event?
So Team Psycho is a triathlon team that was formed back in the 90s, I think, early 90s probably. And it was one of the first triathlon teams ever formed. And it continues to this day, although these days there's a lot of former triathletes that are now just cyclists or even just swimmers. We've expanded a little bit. But yeah, all the people on the team pretty much had this little quality of having psycho karma, which meant just kind of willing to do anything and go hard
I
all day
love
long.
that.
So yeah, so the B2VT ride was kind of right up their alley. I will confess, people have sometimes accused me, or not accused. They're like, "Yeah, you were on that first ride," and I'm like, "No, I was always the timid one." I'm like, "You guys do it 1 year first, and I'll see if you survive. And if you get through it, maybe I'll do it the next year." That was the same thing with like doing an Ironman. I was always like, let's see if other people can do this first, and then I'll see if I can jump in. So, but anyway, go ahead.
Nowadays, is it, I think it's around 150 miles. Is it a race? Is it a charity event, a grand fondo? What is this thing?
Yes.
It's yeah, it's classified as a fun ride, so I would definitely call it type 2 fun, the kind that's fun once we've completed it. But we have a big charitable component where a lot of people along the route we've asked to partner with us to help us run aid stations and volunteer. And so we usually will have some sort of donation to their that rewards them for helping us out and gets the community involved in the ride. For many, many years, we also had a charitable component that Team Psycho, who was obviously intimately involved in the ride, had their own charitable arm, which was called the Elite Development Program. And it was conceived of back when the sport just got into the Olympics. And there were a whole bunch of people that were kind of potential Olympians, but could not make ends meet in the sport because we didn't really have a lot of funding back then from the USA Triathlon and stuff. So one of the guys on our team, Carmen Monks, came up with the idea of just having this charitable arm, and we got B2B at the time to contribute a bunch of money to that. And so that was a big funding source for the Elite Development Program. And we ended up sponsoring a whole bunch of Olympians, but they were,
Wow.
21, 22 years old when we started. And then it was 10 years later, they made the Olympic team. So we kind of feel like we gave a whole bunch of these people just the kind of stepping stone they needed to make it into the professional ranks.
That's interesting. Because we like to interview events that have some sort of charitable component, and so I'm really glad you guys are doing something with that. I'd love for one of you to tell us about the course. I've heard it's evolved over the years, like you mentioned. I've heard some people long for the old course. I don't even know what that means, but what is the course this year? You mentioned it starts in Bedford. I'd love to hear someone just talk about the terrain, elevation, all that stuff.
Well, if somewhere in mid-June you hear my name reverberating around the cosmos in pain and suffering, and perhaps surrounded by four-letter words, then that would be me probably who should talk about the course. It's in the original form. It was really on a lot of really big roads, and it didn't have a lot of character. But as the ride evolved, we changed the course, and we added some hilly components. I mean, essentially, you're leaving from
Features.
sea level. Yeah, features. One feature that's remained, I think, all but maybe the first couple, is a hill climb we call the Leviathan. And that was named after a Harpoon beer at the time that had a very high percentage of alcohol. I think it was a little darker, and sort of contributed to the sort of the whole mystique around that climb. But I think 150 miles is a lot, and I think the challenge of the event really comes to the pacing. Sort of the group and the folks that you start with, and then you're gaining quite a bit of vertical leaving from sea level and ending up in Vermont. We for better or worse, we've had a couple of different finish areas. We went to Okemo to finish after Harpoon for a while,
Mhm.
and that provided some really great opportunity to add some hills. And then there was a paving thing that was going on, and we had to reroute. And then we found Taylor Road, which is a brutal climb near the end, and that just added an order of magnitude of difficulty. And then COVID happened, and then we couldn't go to Vermont because Vermont was really slower to open. So we went to New Hampshire, and then that presented a slightly different finish at Mount Sunapee and had Mountain Road, which
Mhm.
people were very upset with, and that was wonderful. And so I had a great opportunity there. And then we switched to Stratton Mountain a few years ago, and that is on top of the mountain. I mean, their base lodge is very high, and so the only way to finish is to get up the hill to do that. And we added a gravel section. It's only about a mile and a half, and in the sense of gravel, it wasn't challenging, but it did raise a lot of concern for people and add a factor because people were concerned about a nice bike or road tires over that. I don't think we had any incidents on it or none that were reported to me. But again, just sort of what sort
Yeah.
of naturally turned into the opportunity of changing the course really became kind of a nice change up. And now we're back to a similar course in the sense that we finish at Harpoon again. We did last year and we will again this year in Windsor. And that was a really bit of a homecoming. We had a really wonderful course, and we got the opportunity to ride around the Scutney and then finish in the town of Windsor. And
That's awesome.
it was really fun to have that again.
What's the total elevation then?
It's just under 9,000 feet now, I think, over 150 miles. So
Ooh, all right. Not too bad for that type of distance, but it's still very intimidating. Are there any time segments like a Grand Fondo?
We have had those on some years. We don't have them every year. We're debating about bringing those back in. We sort of want to keep it as a fun ride, but it is fun to have a few. It's still fun to have a few little time segments, especially what we usually would do is just have like 3 of the big climb sections timed, and then you would accumulate those 3 segments to measure yourself against everybody else. So we might bring those back. The timing is always a little bit of a challenge because we go through some pretty remote areas. Sometimes having service out there can be a little tricky, and
Yeah.
that impacts the time ability to time some of the segments.
So, Karen, have you done this before?
Yeah.
What would you say? Like, what's the secret sauce to finishing this event in one piece?
uh, it's what Skip said. It's pacing and it is nutrition. And yeah, patience. You just can't get too excited about the first 40 miles. And a lot of people are just so ramped up and excited that they just go off like a bat out of hell on the first 20 miles and, use up all their glycogen. And there's a lot of jockeying for position. And so, there's some people that aren't used to riding in huge groups like that. And so, if the group accelerates up a hill, you think, oh, well, if that's what I've got to do to stay with them. But the people that are a little bit more reserved and like, okay, it's a long way. Let's just hold off here and we'll probably reel those people in around mile 90. And that usually ends up being the case.
What would you say to the person who, let's say, signs up for like the 17 or 18 mile an hour pace, but finds himself going like 21 miles an hour the first 50 miles? What would you say to that person to just back off?
yeah,
Yes. It's yeah. I mean, I have to give that advice to people all the time, even in something like a 20-minute time trial that we do, the first 5 to 10 minutes, you're going to feel great, but you have to be thinking about how am I going to feel on the second half. So, but there's definitely some people that are veterans. And so, ask around, have you done this before? Do what they do. So, and then it's the other thing is just, not getting behind on your nutrition. If it's it varies for the weather too, figuring out what clothing to wear. It's always best to have some layers. So start, prepared for in case it gets cold. And then if you're getting hot, you can take something off, throw it in your pack. Or we have special needs stations where, you could put a extra jacket and get it brought up to the 80-mile mark.
Cool.
You can also discard clothes at 80 miles and we'll bring it to the finish. So yeah, we try and accommodate as much as we can in that regard. And then, the aid stations are spaced out, but because it's not a race, people get off their bikes, they go to the bathroom, they regroup with the people that they wanted to ride with. You stand around, chat, have, some really good nutrition instead of just trying to have a gel while you're riding. So it's very different from something like an Ironman race where, you can't stop and you have to fuel while you're riding. So that's also nice. And that makes it a little more social. It also
Yeah.
makes it a little more dangerous into all of a sudden, your 10 to 15-minute aid station stop has turned into an hour and 20 minutes while you try and gather your group. And that makes the day get a lot longer if you're that group that, spends too long at the aid station. So I always tell people, I'm like, look, if you just keep your aid station stop to 10 to 15 minutes, you're going to make up 30 minutes on a lot of people. So
Wow.
it's a good strategy, actually.
So Skip, let's say hypothetically I'm going at 22 miles an hour and I get to mile 100 and I completely blow up and I can't go any further. Is there a SAG vehicle to save my life?
Sort of. The first question that a SAG vehicle is going to ask you is what your contingency plan is. We do, you know, be clear that you should be prepared to ride that distance. Though we have softened our stance a little bit from the early days, and we have some opportunities where we'll forward people from one rest stop to another. And if it really looks like you're not going to make it before our cutoff times or whatever, we do have at one of the later rest stops, we have a busing option where it isn't, it's not perfect because we'll get you there, but then you have to wait until that bus is ready to go. But I think, generally people are pretty positive about it. I have to tell this one story about that because you asked.
Yeah, love to hear it.
I, I often drive sweep on the course, and I'll sort of making sure that the stragglers are sort of making their way. And at the base of the Leviathan, which was about mile 80 maybe, I saw this young woman standing with like a city bike and sneakers on. And she had like bike shorts and a jersey on, but she also had a ride number. And I thought, wow, that's fairly uncharacteristic for a B2VT rider, but maybe she's someone's friend or something that was just hanging out. So I drove by, didn't say anything. And, I went down and checked further on the course. There was no one. And I came back and she was still standing there. And so I just stopped and said, hey, how's it going and what's going on? And she's like, oh, well, I think I'm done. And I was thinking, oh, really? Okay. So what does that mean? Like, you want me to run you up the course to a rest stop, or what can I do to help you? And so she said, no, it's been a lot and I think I'm done. And so I was like, well, I can't get you to the finish, but you can ride around in the van with me, and at some point I'll find a place where I can get you to the bus. And so she rode around with me probably for an hour and a half. And then eventually I ended up leaving her in the rest stop with the bus, and she probably spent an hour there. And then, the bus takes a while to get to the finish, and she gets to the finish. Now it's an hour into the barbecue, and I'm finally off the course because the course is closed. And I'm walking across, and this young woman runs across the field to me and gives me a big hug and says, hey, I had the best day. And thank you so much for, and I was thinking to myself, boy, that sounds like really rough day to be in a van all day. But, you know,
Wow.
she took her cycling experience from very beginner and pushed quite a bit, got to a point, and embraced the fact that she did all she could do, and that's what it took to get to the finish, and had a good day. So I was okay with
Wow.
that.
So what is like the fastest sort of finishing time and like the Dean Phillips sort of times versus the slowest finishing time? What's the range on that?
It's pretty extreme, I think. I mean,
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking that they end up averaging, on depending on the year and the weather conditions, they're probably in the 22 to 23 miles an hour range. That the lead pack with Dean Phillips is usually driving the bus there. And there'll be a group of maybe 7 or 8 that'll manage to come in with him or close to him. And I thought I'd tell a story because of Skip reminded me of this last year. On one of the training rides, I met a woman, and I rode with her on one of the training rides. And she was a 13 to 14 mile an hour girl. And we do say she should be able to ride 15 miles an hour to ride the B2VT. Her name is Jean Carlson. She's from Lincoln, which is my town. And I'd never met her before, which I was shocked. But I was chatting with her for a long time on this training ride, and she's like, "Yeah, I've done it every year for over 20 years." Like she told me when she started and that she'd never missed a year. And I was doing the math. I'm like, you might be the person that's done more of these than anybody. I said, we have two other options besides the 150 miler. We have a 112 kind of sometimes it's been anywhere from 100 to 112, depending on the year. And then we also instituted a uh, metric century 62. So I was like, did you always do the long ride? And she said, oh yeah, always. And I was like, wow, like good on you, this year, she jumped in, was, off in one of the very first waves, and I saw her come in, probably one of the last people to cross the line, but she did it in like, I don't know, maybe probably 10, 11 hours, maybe. I should do the math, but she just had great endurance, good, discipline, and she just chugged her way through the things.
Yeah.
It's incredible what you can do if you put your mind to it, is my point. And
It's
she used to have a group that did it with her, and one by one they all dropped off, and she's just like, no, I really like it, I want to do it every year. So she
I
does.
was not aware that you had other distances. So this year you're offering a metric, a 100 and a 150?
We've had that for the last maybe 5 to 6 years. I think we started having other options, and kind of a way to introduce people to the big daddy of the ride. And sometimes it's a little bit of a I don't know, when we let people switch distances up until the last week. And I do find, like last year, we had such a bad spring for training. It was cold all the time, raining almost every weekend. And I think a lot of people felt like their training just was not there this year. So we had a rash of people switching from the long ride to the century. And I think that having that out, sometimes I'm like, oh, it's too bad, because I bet if they had to do it, they would have done
Yeah.
it.
Where does that start?
So we bus people up to the first aid station. So you do the whole, you finish with everybody, but you
Okay.
start a little bit, you start 40 miles up the road. And same thing with the metric century. You start at the second aid station, which is roughly the 80-mile mark. So you ride that, and it's still quite hilly. I mean, they're still pretty challenging rides. So
Yeah.
it is for someone that's never done a big ride like that. It's a great way to get started, just see what it's all about, and see if you're maybe a candidate for the longer one.
Well, and I should have asked in the beginning, when does it take place?
June 20th.
June 20th.
It's Father's Day weekend traditionally, so it's the Saturday before Father's Day. And then
That's
the VT
awesome.
Monster is on Mother's Day weekend. So there's a nice synergy there. So the VT Monster, this is the first year we've separated the rides. So the VT Monster is on May 8th, right? Skip. Got that right.
Okay, I'm glad you mentioned that because in my mind they were always on the same day, and it sounds like they were. But Skip, could you tell us, like, it sounds like this is your baby. What inspired you to create the VT Monster? I'm really curious to hear about the course, how it was founded.
Well, so we started it in Okemo, and in Vermont, gravel riding is quite a scene, and it because a lot of the roads aren't paved, it just naturally lends itself to a different kind of riding. And I think the gravel scene was beginning to happen, and I love it. I've done it for years, even on cross bikes or even things before there was really a gravel bike.
How many years has
And
it been going on?
I think this will be the ninth.
Ninth year. Okay.
Ninth year. So we had a guy who had done a bunch of different things with like the Killington stage race or whatever, who was helping us at the finish at Okemo. And he and I were thinking about what a gravel opportunity would be. And we thought, if people have ridden the B2VT a bunch, wouldn't it be fun to ride a gravel event in an all off year? And then we have this big venue to have a party at the end, and they're all cyclists and like-minded people. So to have it all sort of come together and have the party together was sort of the idea. And it kind of took off from there. A typical gravel event can be somewhere between 40 and 70 miles. Harder as you get towards 70. And so our first event was 78 miles and just brutal with like
Oof.
9,000 feet of climbing. And we've kind of kept that standard. But, now sort of fast forward through a couple of different locations. We're back at Stratton again this year, but we have a 48, which I suppose is the nano as we call it, but it's still got over 5,000 feet of climbing, plenty of work in there, but it's a beautiful course. And it's a little more accommodating. And then the 78, the original distance, is in around the 9,000 foot range. And then we added the 101 a few years ago, which is almost 13,000 feet of climbing, but just remote, spectacular, gravel roads out. I mean, there's almost no, if we didn't have the rest stops, there's no real place to fuel. So, and
But this all takes place like around Stratton, right?
it does, starts and ends in
Okay.
Stratton. And so the plus is you get a nice big downhill at the start. That can be considered a plus, but then you have to get back to the mountain. One little thing I'll add, just sort of on a personal note for me, events like the B2VT and the all the courses of the VT Monster, I find really the only way I can disconnect is, adding that challenge or my ability to, or my interest in just being out in that challenge, sort of embracing the
Mhm.
difficulty and the time away. It just kind of frees my mind and lets me, you know, separate from all of the things like work and family and the stuff that aren't bad, but maybe I need a break from. And so I've always been
Yeah.
driven towards that stuff. And the VT Monster really fit that for me. So
All right, I have to tell a quick story about this is one of my favorite things of since kind of taking over the running of the event with Skip and the crew was we were at a post race gathering after like it was two years ago I think at Stratton, and that we had a post race kind of party for the people. A lot of people would stay over because Stratton had rooms and everything. Skip was sitting up near the front of the bar and or no, yeah, there were a whole bunch of people in the bar, and Skip had been finishing up some stuff, for cleaning up the course or whatever. And he comes walking in the door, and like 30 people just stood up and clapped. They were like so happy at the challenge he had presented to them for that. For it was
Wow.
the gravel grinders, so they were all there in one little group kind of. And I've never seen like a race director just cheered like that. It was
That's
pretty
really
amazing. I
cool.
was like, that is very gratifying because he put a ton of work into designing the course and clearing it. And, he did almost all that work himself. And so I was very happy that he got that kind of adulation. It's usually, the entire ride they were cursing him probably, but once it was done, they were like, "You're a hero."
Well, I feel like we're getting a little bit of a 2 for 1 here. So, just about the gravel event, is this on sort of your traditional Vermont roads? Are you going category, what do they call it? Category 4 or something? Like, what kind of trails are these? And is it true gravel bike, or do I need my mountain bike?
you can do it on a gravel bike. And interestingly, the Nano, the shorter course, has a little more class 4 than the rest of the courses. I'm mixed on that. I personally love class 4. I'll go, do that. But the thing about gravel riding for me is there are just so many spectacular roads that you don't really need that piece. I mean, there are events that do that. So
Mhm.
I on the 78 and the 101, which share a lot of the course together, there is 1.5 mile section of class 4, which if you were really nervous about it, you could ride around it, and we would support that. It's really you're about 80% on super great gravel roads. It can be loose in places and it's still dirt roads, but and people say, well, there's some pavement out there. And I think, well, I think you'll be pretty happy about that. So you can take a gel or drink a little bit of, or maybe just
Yeah.
have some rest. Because if you look at the course profile, there's 1 mile along the river that's flat. The rest of it is either up or down. And that little
Wow.
bit of road gives you the opportunity to take a drink or have a goo. And I will say two of the steepest sections on the course are paved. So you'll go on a dirt road and then you'll come to this just wall, which is paved, and then it goes back to dirt road. And I think that Vermont does that because they maybe couldn't plow it if they didn't
Yeah, yeah.
have the traction. I don't really know the reason,
That makes sense, though.
but yeah, so I'm not as much in this event as about the class 4 stuff unless it's really rideable. I really just love the experience and the views and just being out, on the road. So,
What are your thoughts on e-bikes at your events?
I'm okay with them. The industry has sort of moved that way, and I would be supportive of it, especially because we don't have the class 4 section. So essentially, you're riding on the road. I do believe that they have to sit in a class of their own, though. I've been at events where I've been in the mix, and I'm on the rivet, and I've got an e-bike or two there with me, and you know they may be working as hard as me, or they may not be. Even if they're working twice as hard as me, I'm thinking that they're not working as hard as me psychologically. But
I know
as
that
long
other organizers do allow e-bikes, but they limit them to the shorter courses because there isn't enough battery power to get them through a 70-mile gravel day, let's say.
That's
So,
true.
yeah, I was just
I
so
we
it's yeah,
I haven't had any to date. We have not had any. We haven't made a direct category, but we also don't say you can't ride one.
okay.
The challenge would be, as you say, if you show up on your e-bike, we're not providing any support for that, and to pedal a heavy e-bike up the last bits of the course might be harder than having the E for the first part. But again, I'm not against it, and I think if it enabled a person to get out and do the event, or to participate and get out on the roads in something they might not do, then I'm all for that.
One thing the e-bikes do, which I'm all for as well, is it allows like some people to ride together that normally couldn't, a husband and wife, for example, or a kid with their older father or something. So I think that that's a great reason to have an e-bike out there with your family members or even your teammates. Yeah. And it's not like, if it was a competitive ride, yeah, you'd need to have a separate class and division and everything. And that's something we'd probably have to have people declare if we are having time segments again, that, you make sure that there's a special category for anyone on an e-bike. So,
Well, this is sort of off topic, but I feel like from what I think, the rise in sort of AFib, awareness of AFib with aging endurance athletes, I feel like a bunch of us are headed that way where we're going to be e-biking our way through a lot of these events in the coming years, but that's another topic.
yeah.
The topic for sure.
Okay,
Okay.
so one thing I love about the B2VT, I've never done it, but I feel like whenever that event happens, I always see, people come cruising by me wherever I am with my group ride, and you have these iconic jerseys and kits. Number one, who designs them each year? Number two, who is your vendor of choice?
Go ahead, Skip. He's getting some more plaudits. Well, the jersey this past year was done by Skip and his wife Donna, and they did a fantastic job. It was the 25th anniversary, so we really wanted a really special jersey for that. And Skip decided to try his hand at design, and he did a fantastic job. We've been with Pactimo the entire time. Is that true, Skip? Have we ever been with another company besides Pactimo?
Yeah, it's like 20, 21 years. When we had no jersey the first year, of course. And then the next 3 years, we had a local mass company that made sort of like club jerseys. And then we
Okay.
partnered with Pactimo that really could do the custom work. And so we've literally been with them every single time since. And they have been a fantastic partner, and they do a great job. I mean, they working with their designers and whatever. And we had a woman who goes by Tri Girl Pink, Lane DiPotetto.
Oh
Also
yeah,
Uh,
I've met her.
fantastic.
Yep,
yeah,
I met her.
she did a lot of the designs, or would partner with us in helping to evolve them. Uh,
That's
Yes.
cool.
she contributed for many of those jerseys, and we owe her a debt of gratitude for all
I
of her
think she
help.
also came up with this.
Yeah,
I always like this little
Very
thing. So with
nice.
the heart, the bite.
That's awesome. For those of you that can't see, Karen is showing us her T-shirt. It has a cool design. Does the jersey come with the price of admission, and what is the price of admission for the B2VT?
so a jersey is included in the B2VT. I'll just say it is not included in the VT Monster, but there is still a jersey. And the price for the B2VT is $269. And then if you want a bus ride home, there's an add-on to get you for the bus, which about half of the people take.
Okay.
And the the event, we were sort of talking about rest stops and logistics of transportation and all of those things for support. One of the things about the B2VT that is unusual is it is a point-to-point single day event, and it is a lot of work to run a single day event that starts and ends in the same place. But it is unprecedented to run an event that goes from one place through a bunch of states and ends 150 miles away. And all of the things that come with getting their bikes safely home, and all the people safely home, and all of the things.
Wow.
So it's a big lift to make that event happen.
Well, kudos to you and your team. I guess it's Team Psycho. Is that who I can say kudos to? Is it still Team Psycho?
We're partnered with them. I mean, and Karen and I are still psychos, today and
Okay.
every day.
Well, who is there a group then that we should be thanking?
It's
A lot of our volunteers that the people we partner with to, run the Chesterfield Fire Department that runs the aid station in Chesterfield, for example. So, a lot of it is we have to partner with people to be able to cover 150 miles. A lot of Team Cycle people will come out to help with, some of the road crew. Conti's Bike Shop has been huge support the last year and this year. They'll do a lot of the road crew. Anthony Lascaris, is that how you say his
Yep.
last name?
Yep.
Has been a part of it, our head mechanic for many, many, many years.
he's
He's
probably
helped
at least 20 as well.
Yeah, he's probably helped, 1,000 riders be able to complete that event.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Shout out to
So
those guys. Yeah, go ahead.
we're a team of four. I mean, it's Karen, myself, Seth, and Eric, who are, basically, I think we call ourselves now B2VT Cycling Events, but
Okay.
you know, we're really the folks that are just making it happen. I think it's really comes down to the riders and the volunteers and the folks out on the course that, what we're all about. We don't need any more credit than uh what it takes to get to the starting line, or to make the starting line happen, I suppose.
What's a good year for you in terms of like number of participants?
I think lately, we've been in the 650 to 800 range
Wow.
at the peak of the ride. I think we were around 12 or 1300, and that would have been around 2010 to, or I guess 2012 to 2014 were sort of those numbers.
Cool.
With the VT Monster happening on the same day, though, we're a little closer to 1,000 riders, participating in multiple events. So it'll be interesting to see this year as we split them apart and what that looks like.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah.
if it doesn't go well, we'll put them back together next year. We're open to change and sort of the dynamics that come with that.
I had a little bit of a dream to have the road ride on Saturday and the gravel ride on Sunday and see how many people would do both.
Do the back to back.
Yeah, there's some pretty crazy people out there.
Oh, there are.
Yeah.
Okay, so actually, Skip, before we go, I have a couple of final questions. So you rode across the country on a tandem
Yeah.
with someone who is very old, basically.
So yeah.
Tell me about this story. How did this come to be, and who did you ride with, and what was your
So
involvement?
it was my great uncle Tom Dickey, who he had retinal pigmentosa, which is a pigment that grows on your retinas and caused him to be blind.
Mm.
And he rode a single bike for most of his life, and then tell as he said, he started running into too many parked cars, and then he had to stop doing that. And so then somebody suggested to him in his 60s that he start riding a tandem. And so he would hire local college kids for a buck or two an hour to ride on the front of the tandem for him so he could ride. And I can't remember the year. Well, it was must have been around 1980, probably 1980. For his 70th birthday, he hired a guy to ride with him from Carbondale, Illinois, where he lived, out to Palo Alto, California for. Oh no, I'm sorry, that was the other way around. That was my ride. Apologize. From
Okay.
Palo Alto to Amherst University for his 50th college reunion.
Wow.
And he loved it so much that he continued to do that. And so for his fifth ride across the country and his 80th birthday, I rode with him from Carbondale to Palo Alto to celebrate that birthday. And he was a remarkable guy, and just loved to ride the bike and loved to be outside, and loved that sort of engagement on the tandem, and sort of the freedom that a bike brings us all in our own different ways. And so I was telling Karen, we were chatting about it. This was in 1990, I think, was my first trip, and or 89 was my first trip. And there were no cell phones, so we would plan a route. We had everything packed on the bikes, on the bike, and we'd roll into a town, and I'd go to a phone booth and like look for motels and call them and see if they had a vacancy, and we'd stay. And we couldn't make reservations because if you miss one, then they're all blown unless you're going to get in a van or drive.
Yeah.
So, and I will also say that riding west is not advised, because the wind does prevail from the west, and it is tough. But then a couple of years later, he wanted to raise money for Recordings with the Blind, which is a group. I think it's probably not around as much today, because recording is so, and audiobooks are so common. But so we rode from LA to Boston, so 3,500 miles over 7 weeks. this was with an organized group, so we didn't have to carry everything on the bike. He was 83 time, and we're
Amazing.
you know I'm in my 50s and late 50s, and I sometimes groan getting out of bed, and he would ride 60, 70, 80 miles a day, maybe even 100 depending on flatter days, day after day after day for 7 weeks, and never complained once. So
That's incredible. Really
quite a
cool.
character.
Thanks for sharing that. And Karen, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you a question. So, as someone who's competed at the world's highest levels of triathlon, what's your biggest piece of advice for, let's say, some of the age group athletes who are trying to balance sport, work, and life?
Gosh, the biggest piece, yeah, that's tough. The thing that always worked for me is to keep it to kind of the level that I enjoyed. I didn't sacrifice everything in my life to pursue professional triathlon. I kept my social life very
Yeah.
well intact. I always was training, rather, and I do this with the people I coach too. I'm like, join a master's swim program. Like, swimming alone is it's a drag. It's a burnout. Like, find community. And if you're surrounded by people that are doing the same thing you're doing, it's not like you're working. You're just being a part of a group that's chasing a cool goal. And it's the same with the B2VT ride. Like, if you are there with a bunch of people, it's amazing how the miles fly by compared to doing something all by yourself is kind of drudgery. So yeah, surround
That's a
yourself with people that are gonna kind of elevate you and make it fun and give you a sense of kind of community and shared, camaraderie.
That's a great piece of advice. And I'll close with Skip. What makes the New England endurance community so freaking awesome?
Yeah. Well, it is a community. I think that is really the key word there. And when I moved to Concord, which is where I live now, I moved there because there was a great cycling it was sort of the cycling mecca. And this is almost 28 years ago. And my wife was saying, why are we only looking at Concord? We can't afford to look in Concord. And I was like, I don't know. They have good schools and all the rides start from there. So that seems like a good place to be. We ended up finding a place, and we've been there since, and all the rides do start from there. So it's a really back then I was after fast people to chase, and today I'm just amazed at the community, how we help each other out, and how there is such a kindred spirit between so many, whether you're fast or slow or anywhere in between. People will always participate in your event, participate in your ride, help you when you're in need, things on the bike and off the bike. And I assume that's somewhere else, but then maybe not. I mean, it seems like we all know each other somehow, and it's just really a great
Yeah.
place to be.
That's a great answer. I mean, just we're recording this here. It's winter. And a few weeks ago, me and some friends went out to Wachusett to skin up Wachusett. And lo and behold, there's like 35 other people there, many of them from Concord, Massachusetts, who ride bikes, who are also out there skinning. It's like, what the heck? This is such a small and cool community. So,
And I know all of them, and many of them are B2VTers or VT Monster folks. So
Yeah.
it is, and I think it's that endurance. We're all endurance junkies, right? We all love a little bit of adrenaline. We love that challenge. And, misery loves company. So if you're going to
yep.
go out and suffer, do it with your friends.
Okay, where can we learn about the B2VT and the VT Monster? Give me some socials and some websites.
So the VT Monster is just a vtmonstergravel.com.
And how do we
And
register? Is it bike reg?
it's bike
Uh-huh.
reg. Yep. But the registration for both of them are on those sites. B2VTRide.com is, where you'll find the B2VT. And then at VT Monster is Instagram for it. And at B2VT.ride is for the B2VT. Embarrassingly, we used to have B2VT Ride, but somebody lost the password. Don't look at me. So we
Is there
we had
anything
to.
else either of you would like to plug or mention about these events? These really cool events?
Just because we were talking about, the team camaraderie and stuff, just we love having teams do it because, they'll often show up and they'll ride together and it just makes them all have a blast. And we like the word of mouth that a team will bring because then they tell other teammates. So we've been working with teams and Pactimo the last few years where if you have at least 8 riders, we will customize your jersey with your team logo.
Nice.
Yeah, if you manage to get 8 people in your club to do it, then I can see it on the registration and I contact you and just say, "Hey, send me your logo." You get your logo on your jersey. So, it's just kind of an added thing
That's
to kind of
cool.
give an incentive for people to maybe rally their teammates and it's more fun for everybody because of it.
I thought you were gonna say you send them out in waves of 8 like a team time trial for this event.
Yeah.
No, they do that on their own. We don't
Yeah.
need to help them with that. But one other thing I'll add, and it sort of builds on the custom jersey piece. We were talking about our charitable focus before, and sort of how we do that. We've partnered with small community organizations throughout. So it's a local fire department, it's a local PTA, fire and rescue, a food bank in a community that we ride through, and we really like that because those organizations are hard to find fundraising for them, and
Mhm.
we ask for them usually for some volunteer effort, for a part of a day, but we make a pretty nice donation to them for that. You know, Beyond that, we love the community side of fundraising. I mean, it's if you're out raising for some of the bigger organizations, they have huge engines to support them and to get people to fundraise for them, and people who are very passionate about that. And we're always looking to partner with smaller groups, where we could customize the jersey for a group that wanted to raise money. We could make a donation and help, that group participate in both the cycling community and fulfill, some effort or, charitable org that they're passionate about. And we can get behind them and let them drive that instead of mandating
Well, that's
some way to do
wonderful.
it. So,
Yeah.
and
Wow,
we would
that's
do that with we do that with both events.
yeah, that's interesting. That's kind of unique in the cycling world, I think, too. That's fantastic. I really enjoyed our conversation today. I want to thank both of you for coming on the podcast here. I'll definitely be tagging you guys in our social media. So we had Skip Thomas here, the ride director and mastermind behind the VT Monster and the B2VT. We had Karen Smyers, world champion triathlete, and also heavily involved with this event. So I think whether or not you're an Ironman or you're a gravel grinder or roadie, I think this is going to be an awesome event to do this year.
We'll see you there.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Art. We'd love to have you on either event.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Maybe I'll rally a crew. Until next time, get out there, keep pushing your limits, drop some hammers, and enjoy the beautiful terrain of New England. Thank you.